Going live just a little early, just to give people a chance to hop on and for me to get my stuff together. Let me see. You would think that would work the way I want it to. Alright, it's happening. Good morning. This is just me putting things out there early so people can hop on and so I know what I'm doing, because that has to happen every single time. Perfect. Alright. We're going to give it a second, but to fill in the noise, if you did not know, this weekend is the Great Backyard Bird Count. So if you don't know what that is, essentially it is a worldwide event hosted by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, where essentially anybody can be a citizen scientist by going and watching their birds, whether it's in their backyard, at a park, at somewhere you just like to get away, or at your workplace, because we sometimes do that here too. We'll watch the birds out back as we're doing things. And basically you watch the birds for 15 minutes or more, and keep track of the species you see as well as the individuals that you see. And sometimes that part can be a little tricky, but essentially, let's say you're watching a cardinal at the feeders and you have one cardinal, so you mark that as one. If that cardinal leaves and then you see one cardinal again, it still counts as one, because you haven't seen more than one in the area. So if you see two cardinals pop up, you know you have two, or if you see a male and a female, then you know you have two as well. So basically do the best you can with counting the individuals that you see, and when you keep track of that, then you can also post that to either Merlin ID if you do have that phone app, or you can also post it to ebird.org, which is just an easy way to kind of upload those checklists as well. So if you want to participate in the Great Backyard Bird Count, watch your birds for 15 minutes or more, keep a list of the species you see and the number of individuals you see, and then post that on Merlin ID or ebird.org. And that's helping be a citizen scientist, because you're helping ornithologists around the world figure out what certain movement patterns and bird populations are doing what, because they can't be everywhere at once. So that's what we're for. So yeah, Backyard Bird Count's happening from 14th to the 17th, so there's still some time to participate if you'd like. If you have any questions, feel free to let us know. Good morning, guys. Thanks so much for joining me. We are at 8:30. Perfect. I was just giving it some time to kind of get there. So we will go ahead and just jump into it as well. Good morning. I hope everybody's doing well. My name is Jolene. I'm a certified songbird feeding specialist with Wild Birds Unlimited of Concord. And today we're going to be talking about bluebirds, which is very exciting. We are in February, the day that this is all happening, because some people might see this video later, and we are basically right on the cusp of nesting season, and a lot of people really enjoy the bluebirds during this time of year, and especially through nesting season, because they are one of the few species that we have that'll utilize the nest boxes as well. So we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk about bluebirds in general. So if you guys have any questions during the presentation, definitely feel free to drop a comment. I will be trying to respond to those when I can, or I'll reach back out to you later about it as well. So with that, we're going to go ahead and just jump right into it. So bluebirds are actually in the family Turdidae, which has a funny name, but it also includes our robins, thrushes, chats, and other bluebirds as well. These birds prefer more of an open habitat. So if we've got grasslands, farmlands, urban areas, if you've got those kind of open neighborhoods, you're going to find a lot of bluebirds in those locations. Areas with fewer trees that have very little understory, so like not a lot of shrubs or anything like that, as well as like sparse ground cover. So they're looking for very open habitats there. Usually you can find them on like telephone lines or on fence posts, kind of observing the area around them. But they also do exist in a lot of human-modified habitats as well, so neighborhoods and things of the like. They are a partial migrant, so in the state of North Carolina, in the state of North Carolina, which we are here, they can be found here year-round. Does that mean they're going to be in your yard year-round? Depends on what you have to offer them during that time of year. They might kind of go back and forth depending on the season. This year, this winter, has been super crazy with bluebird activity. Everybody's been talking about it, so there obviously was something either last nesting season, there's been a lack of food in certain ways that has them moving to different places, but they've been very busy. So in this purple range, or this purple coloration that you could be found in like the southeast, central, south of the U.S. is going to be their year-round location. So that's where they can be found year-round. You also have the year-round populations in Mexico and a lot of Central America as well in these patches, which is really neat. As we get into summertime, they do expand their range, so a lot of them will go further north into the US and the southern parts of Canada as well too. And when we get into the winter season and that colder weather, like where we're at now, they recede from these farther north areas and then kind of go back into that year-round range, as well as go a little bit farther southwest into Texas and Mexico for that warmer habitat during the winter season. When it comes to identifying your bluebirds, this should be pretty easy, but I know some people do get them confused with some of the other bluebirds we have, such as blue jays or sometimes nuthatches or things like that. So let's talk about that just a little bit. Bluebirds do have a very distinct shape. They are in the same family as robins, so you can kind of consider the fact that they have that kind of round, big belly as just a thrush feature or that turdidae feature, which is always fun. Bluebirds don't have much of a neck, kind of like how jays do, so they have very compact body. They have a thinner beak, and they do have a notched tail. If you ever see the tail straight on, it has kind of a V shape indented. Their coloration is also pretty simple, which is really nice. They often have a blue back and blue feathers, as well as a blue head as well. Their upper breast and kind of underneath the wings is kind of a rusty red-orange coloration, and then lower on the belly is more of a white color as well. Bluebirds are sexually dimorphic, which means you can tell the difference between your males and your females. Males often have brighter blue, brighter rust colorations, so you could definitely tell that when you see them, while the females are a little bit more washed out, would kind of be the way. They have more of a gray coloration. That blue is not as strong. However, it can be very distinct on the wing feathers still and on the tail as well. So you can still tell that it's a bluebird, but if you see any of the lighter colors, it's going to be your female. With the bluebirds, they do kind of have a low-pitched warbling song. It's pretty short, kind of all the notes are together versus being separate or anything like that, and it sounds something like this. Of course, it's looking away as well. Hopefully you guys can hear that well. But essentially, it's a very short, kind of 2-3 note warbling song. Very distinct to the bluebirds as well. This is going to be something you hear more during nesting season. Chances are, as we get more into that, you will start to hear that. You'll hear a lot of birds starting to sing more as we get closer to nesting, which starts in March. But in the meantime, sometimes they'll also have a different call. Calls can be a little bit harder to identify, so it's kind of more of a single note, raspy kind of chip noise. But definitely kind of distinctive compared to like the cardinal's chip or a house finch chip as well too. So you can kind of start to put those together to make it easier to identify. Now, there are actually different species of bluebirds in North America. The eastern bluebird is the only one that we have in this section, and it covers a lot of the eastern area as well as some of the central section of North America as well. As we push farther out, then you've got the mountain bluebird, which can be found at higher elevations in central and kind of upper Canada as well too. These birds, again, have the same shape as our eastern bluebirds, but they don't have as much of that rust color, if at all. They're more of a cerulean color all the way through, which is really neat. And then when you go farther out west to the coast as well as southwest, you get the western bluebird as well. These birds look very similar to our eastern bluebird. They have a lot of that more deeper coloration, but the main difference if you ever find yourself in one of those areas, their populations aren't really going to mix. But if you have yourself trouble identifying these birds, you'll notice that the western bluebird has a blue throat in comparison to the eastern bluebird having more of that orange rust color right underneath it as well. So that's kind of a good difference, as well as that kind of brighter coloration that the westerns have. You'll notice too that the male and the female do also have that coloration difference. So the female does have more of that kind of washed out or lighter coloration in comparison to the male. Now, bluebirds do focus more on an insect diet. That thinner bill is more specialized for snagging insects. That they focus on more in the summertime as well, especially when insect populations are very busy. And when it's colder weather, they'll focus more on fruits, seeds, and berries as well. Foraging strategies for these guys can kind of vary, but their biggest one, which I always enjoy watching, is basically a drop foraging strategy that they have. So if you've ever seen your bluebirds, if you ever see them perching like on a branch or on a nest box or a fence post, you'll notice that they usually stay pretty still as they're kind of observing the area around them. That is a part of their foraging strategy. So if you haven't taken the chance to pay attention, what you'll see happen is as they're perched there, they'll continue monitoring the ground for any movement. And once they eventually see an insect or something that catches their eye, they're going to fly down from their perch to the ground, grab that insect or food they were looking at, and then go back to the very same perch where they'll eat their food. So it's a very simple foraging strategy that's easy to follow, and it's a lot of fun to observe because it is so distinct for bluebirds to do, which is a lot of fun. Sometimes they will do some fly catching, so occasionally they can kind of just snatch food out of the air, although it's less uncommon. And then they will kind of glean food underneath leaves or other things like that, depending on what's available as well, too. So you've got those different strategies there as well. As we get closer to nesting season, there's going to be a lot of courtship happening as well too. Not just for bluebirds, but a lot of other songbirds as well. So like I mentioned earlier, these birds will really start to sing, and you'll notice how loud it gets in the spring with all of these birds trying to maintain their territory, because that's how bluebirds maintain their territory as well. They'll find an area they really like, and they will continue to sing to let other birds know, this is my spot. Don't come over here. I like this one. This is what I'm doing. So of course, other birds don't always listen to that, especially other bluebird males that are trying to find a good territory as well. So you can see little disputes kind of happen, little squabbles. These birds will often grapple with other males, so they'll kind of hold foot to foot as they kind of figure things out. Usually these two birds clash, and then I've seen house finches just whoo, as they're working on things, of course. Now, there are certain cases where this grappling can occur between males and females as well. If courtship doesn't go right, or somebody's not happy with something, or if it's, again, a territorial dispute, you can see this behavior happen between males and females as well. So males are the ones that stake out the territory, right? And they're also the ones that show the females potential nesting sites that they can use. So ways that the male shows that he has a good nesting site for the female to be interested in is by taking a piece of nesting material, if that's a piece of grass or anything like that. And what they'll do is they'll basically fly up to the entrance of the cavity or nesting site that they're looking at. They'll poke their head in with the nesting material. They'll poke their head out. They'll kind of look around. They'll do a little flutter as they're right in front of the nesting box. They'll poke their head back in. They'll poke it out, and they'll kind of fly off. Basically saying, hey, look at this really good spot that you could potentially put this nesting stuff in. That's so crazy if you liked it. So essentially, they'll kind of continue to do that until they catch a female's attention, who will investigate the nesting site, see if it's something that she wants to do, and then go from there. These birds are also socially monogamous. So during this season, you will often see a pair together, and they do work together to raise their young. But it's not uncommon for the eggs to have different parents than the ones that are raising them as well. And that could be common amongst a lot of songbird species. But these two do work well together once they've set up for their pair for the season. When it comes to nesting season, that is through March through August in at least our area, and for a lot of North America as well too. These birds will start working on their nesting site, and they usually are secondary cavity nesters. So what this means is, unlike woodpeckers and some nuthatches that will excavate their own cavity in a tree or other things like that, bluebirds will take advantage of already made cavities from seasons past made by the woodpeckers, or from natural cavities that are already there. Very occasionally, there have been reports of bluebirds nesting in an open site, so it's not in a cavity and you can usually see the nest from outside, but that is usually very rare. Once these birds find the nesting site and the female has found a site that she enjoys, she's the one that will actively start building the nest, while the male kind of observes and watches closely, essentially, keeping other male competitors and everything out of the way. When the female builds the nest, it's going to be a cup nest with often dry grass, wood stems, and twigs on the outside. Pine straw is a very popular one for these birds to use. And then on the inside, they'll often line it with finer material, so smaller grasses, maybe horsehair if that's available, occasionally feathers or things like that as well. But I did want to share too, the cavities can all be very different, whether it's a nest box or it's on the side of a tree, like I mentioned, that woodpeckers use from season past. But this was just a really cute video that somebody caught of a female bluebird kind of checking things out and having some nesting material stuck to her beak, because sometimes we just don't have it together as we're trying to get things together. So it was just a fun option there. And let me see. I'm going to skip a little bit forward because it is very cute. I'm not going to lie. I have nothing of value here. I was just like, this is very cute. So it's an interesting time during this time of year where they start to get all that stuff together. When they build the nest, it takes anywhere from 4 to 5 days, so less than a week, and they're usually pretty quick about it. Sometimes they can build more than one nest in certain areas, but they usually focus on, obviously, one style nest when they get there. They can have anywhere from 2 to 3 broods during one nesting season, so 2 to 3 batches of eggs. Oftentimes they have an average of 4 to 5 eggs that are usually a light blue color. They're rarely white, but occasionally can be. Nothing wrong with those, it's just the pigmentation that that female produces. And oftentimes they're very glossy and don't have any marks. Those that are in the Turdidae family often have blue colored eggs as well too. So fun fact, robins also have that because they're in the same family, which is neat. Once all of the eggs are laid, then you're going to have an incubation period where the female lays on the eggs for 12 to 15 days. And then once they hatch, they are altricial young, as you can see down here in the bottom right. They are blind, naked, defenseless. They require a lot of parental care for a bit more time, from 15 to 18 days, before these birds are capable of fledging as well too. So basically, if we break it down for how long this whole process takes, it takes about 4 to 5 days, a single work week, if you will, for them to build and finalize a nest. From there, it takes 12 to 15 days to incubate the egg, so roughly 2 weeks. So we've got kind of 3 weeks-ish total so far. And then from there, they hatch, and then they will fledge in another 15 to 18 days. So overall, you're looking at a process of probably 5-ish weeks for once the nest... for once everything is built and established, before these birds are kind of done with that batch, and then they kind of leave the nest box from there. They will continue to feed the young until, oh my goodness, words are hard. They will continue feeding the fledglings for 3 weeks after they leave the box. So it's not uncommon to see them kind of split up between the parents and kind of work together to feed all the young that they have. As it gets later into the season, it's not uncommon for them to have fewer eggs in each brood because they can only produce so many eggs each year. But those that hatch later in the season may stay with the parents through the winter time. So that's also why you can have some of the bluebird, quite a few bluebirds together in the winter time as well that stick with the parents. Now, once they hatch and once they fledge, then we have this funky juvenile phase where they don't quite look like the parents, but you can definitely tell that it's a bluebird once you see certain features. The juveniles often have a spotted breast as well as back feathers too. These are helpful with camouflage and just making it harder for predators to spot them. If you do pay attention, there is the slightest tint on the wing feathers that you can occasionally find. Usually as it gets closer to the fall, they get their full adult plumage as well, so it doesn't last too long, but it is good to be able to identify that if you are in that nesting season. Is as we get closer, and because so many people do have nest boxes, I do want to mention that juveniles are often at this phase a little young and a little dumb, because at this point all they've done is exist in a box, and now they're out in the world trying to figure things out. So if you do happen to see a fledgling or a juvenile kind of sitting in your yard like, wow, what's that, and not really doing anything, that's the way they are sometimes. Usually the parents are kind of in the area observing what's going on. So even if you see a bird by itself and it's just kind of hunkered down like, oh, this is crazy, just let him do his thing. That's very normal, and the parents are usually nearby. Unless you see something like a physical injury, like blood, or if you see flies or ants, or it seems to be very hunkered down, very slow, very lethargic, and not really responding, then you would want to contact a wildlife rehabber that'll tell you kind of what to do. The Carolina Waterfowl Rescue is the closest one that we have in the Charlotte area that can kind of help us out as well too. So unless you see any of that, usually they're free to kind of do their thing. So just as a heads up as we get closer to nesting season as well. So when it comes to attracting bluebirds to the yard, so one major thing is that they do like that open habitat. So if we're dealing with a more heavily wooded area, you may or may not. It depends on the surrounding area as to whether or not the bluebirds are nearby. I live on more of a wooded lot in a more open neighborhood, so I do still occasionally get bluebirds, which is always fun. But there's a few ways to attract bluebirds. First off, with your food items, there's a few different things you can use. Mealworms are by far the top of the list. These are small little insects that eventually in their life cycle turn into beetles. They are not everybody's favorite. We've got them in the larva phase, and that's why they're little mealworms, you know? So you can feed these two different ways. You can feed them live, so they're still moving around, they're still wiggling. You can offer them that way, or you can offer freeze-dried mealworms. So they are in a bag, they are not moving unless it's static, and they're very easy to kind of use and hand out. Whether or not you use live or dried is completely up to you. Live mealworms can be done in a small cup feeder. You don't want to do too much at a time, and you also want to make sure the cup feeder has smooth sides so that the mealworms can't just like crawl out of it and live their best life. We want them to live their best life feeding the birds, pretty much. But essentially, you want to make sure that they stay in that cup feeder. If you have a lot of mealworms at once, obviously you don't need to put them all out at the same time. So when you store them, usually they're going to be in a container with some air holes, and you're going to put them in the fridge. When you put them in the fridge, that helps them hibernate at a cooler temperature, so they're not moving around, they're not going through their metabolic process as fast and all that jazz. So they're just very slow and easy to maintain. Offering wheat bran to them as a bedding or food source can be helpful, but essentially if you want to offer like the most nutritious, jam-packed mealworm you could possibly offer to your birds, it's good to also feed them different types of veggies and things like that as well too. So you can always take out your mealworms, put in a few baby carrots, kind of leave it out for a few hours, and once they finish that, you can just stick them back in the fridge just to keep their nutritional content up. Other than that, live and dried don't really have too much of a nutritional difference. Both are great for protein, which is great for nesting season, as well as the winter time. You'd be surprised who you can get with just offering mealworms in general. Dried mealworms are great because you can mix those with seed blends. Some seed blends, like our cardinal confetti, have it already mixed in. And they can be easier to store and maintain. And if you're just getting started dealing with mealworms, that is the easiest way to get started. Don't force yourself to do something you're not ready for. And also, I use dried mealworms because it's harder for me to maintain things in my yard sometimes because my life is busy. So it's just easier that way as well. So you've got different options there. Suet is also a great option for these birds. Again, they have kind of that thinner bill, which is great for insect activity, not great for cracking open seed like a cardinal. So suet's also a great option. That's basically beef fat mixed in with like peanuts, fruits, mealworms, things like that as well. You can use suet in the suet cakes, cylinders, plugs, the suet nuggets, or bark butter bits, things like that. Those are all great options that the bluebirds will go for as well. So you've got that variety as well. Bark butter also has great calcium content, so that's going to be great as we get closer to like nesting season too. And there's also a blend called Bugs and Bits, which has the bark butter bits and mealworms mixed in. So you've got some variety of options to choose from there as well with suets. Fruit is also an option, whether it's dried or fresh, so you can get from us different plus blends that have cherries, cranberries, or raisins mixed in. If you want to offer fruit from your grocery store, that's also fine as long as there are no additives and it's not sugar-free, so just regular dried or fresh fruits. If you do like blueberries, raspberries, grapes, strawberries, things like that, feel free to cut it up a little bit just to make it easier for the birds to go for. But keep in mind, fruits can be a little bit tricky because the birds are not used to it being presented that way, and you also have to make sure it doesn't ferment or things like that. So you have to be really on it, and that's got to be something that you want to try. But dried fruits and blends are very easy to maintain as well. And also deshelled seed. These birds will also go for deshelled sunflower hearts or chips. They'll go for some de-shelled peanuts as well. This year, I have seen a lot of bluebird activity going for the sunflower chips that I have in my yard. I have suets and mealworms and things available, but they're also going for that too. De-shelled seed, they don't have to crack open, they can just take it and go, and that's very easy for them to manage as well. So all of these options are great things to offer your bluebirds. You'd be surprised what they go for depending on the season, but definitely mealworms are a very big one that they would be interested in as well this time. I say this time of year, every time of year. Who am I kidding? They always love mealworms. All right. Another way to attract bluebirds to your box is by offering a nest box. There are many different types of nest boxes, whether they're decorative or functional or just like the basic box, many different strategies that you can use. Overall, the most important things when you're looking at boxes in general is you want to make sure that the opening to the bluebird box, so the part that the bird enters through, is 1.5 inches. That is going to be the minimum size that the bluebird can kind of clear through. And it's also going to keep out larger birds like starlings that can potentially try and utilize that box as well, which is a no-no. We don't want them to enter those boxes. These boxes, you want to make sure that the material it's made from is well insulated just for cooler or warmer temperatures. It's got ventilation, so it's not very stagnant air. Got drainage in the event that any water gets in there. It's able to kind of clean things out. And then also a clean out, whether that's a whole sidewall opening or if it's just a small part that you're able to get tongs in there and take out. You want to make sure you have a clean out because we want to remove any old nests that are found in these boxes. So if you haven't removed an old nest from like the previous season, now would be a great time to get started. Old nests can sometimes carry mites, mold, mildew, all that kind of stuff. And usually a lot of birds for the new season will build a new nest on top of the old nest. So you want to go ahead and clean that old one out so that they have fresh material and a fresh starting point to work with. When you're thinking about mounting a house or setting it up wherever you're setting it up, you want to have it at least 5 to 7 feet high. If you go any lower, it's going to be harder to protect from predators such as raccoons, snakes, cats, and squirrels. So keeping it a little bit higher is better. Eye level for a lot of people in that 5-foot range. And then when you're kind of setting it up as well too, they recommend facing it, at least for our area, facing the opening of the box east to southeast as well too. That's just more helpful in regards to sunlight, wind, rain, all that kind of stuff. It's the better direction to face it. And if you have the area, you want to have it that it faces a more open direction. So you want to have that clear flight path towards like an open field or anything like that. So if you're dealing with a conundrum where east to southeast in your yard is actually just a whole wooded section, while west or whichever has a more open path for you, it does not hurt to try facing the more open path first to kind of see what activity you get. And keep in mind, nesting season is only a few months in the year, March through August, and bluebirds themselves will have 2 to 3 broods, and it depends on how many bluebird pairs you have in the area as to whether or not you would have more than that. So there's only like a limited amount of times to see how well that season goes. So if for some reason you don't get birds the first season you have your box out, it happens, that's okay. Give it 2 or 3 seasons before determining, okay, I'm not getting activity at this location. I need to either shift the box or find a better area to kind of work with and take a look at what's going on, what might make this box unlikable-ish for some of the birds that are choosing options there as well too. And again, regardless of like where you're putting the box, keep in mind predators are always going to be an issue, so the better you can protect your box, we'll go over that in a second. And oftentimes we do have competitors that we're kind of dealing with keeping out of the box as well. Starlings, I mentioned, are an invasive species that can be very frustrating and harmful to bluebirds if they're competing for that same box. So that's why the 1.5-inch diameter is so important to keep them out. However, house sparrows are a different style because they are around the same size as bluebirds and can cause a lot of damage and competition there as well too. In regards to house sparrows, they are also non-native species, so they're not protected in North America. So if you do see them building a nest in your nest box, feel free to remove that nest at any point in time to kind of keep them from nesting if you are looking for bluebirds that way. There are things such as sparrow spookers and the like that people utilize to kind of keep sparrows out, but also encourage bluebirds. I do not have much information on this, so it's one of those things where A lot of those that are heavy in the bluebird community might be more interested in as well too, so you will have to do your own research on that if you are also competing with house sparrows as well. So keep that in mind too. When it comes to protecting from overall predators in general, there's a few different strategies. I will say with complete confidence that setting up a nesting box on a pole system is going to be much easier to protect and defend than setting it up on a tree. It allows you to put the box wherever you want to. You can face it any direction. It's very easy to mount and stabilize. At Wild Birds Unlimited, we have the advanced pole system, which makes it very easy to adjust whatever you need for these types of houses. Usually, if you've got the clearance and the range for it, stovepipe baffles, like the one in the bottom picture here, are great because they keep out raccoons. If you have the clearance and the height, they keep out squirrels, and they definitely keep out snakes, which is great. By the way, as I am somebody that enjoys snakes as well, I will say we enjoy snakes for the environment and what they do. We do not like them in our nest boxes. So the best way to prevent any snakes from causing us a kerfuffle or having to deal with them is to baffle it straight from the beginning, because they're great for the environment. And everybody's just trying to get some protein, essentially, from the eggs that are in there as well. So stovepipe baffles are a great option, as well as Noel guards. Noel guards are basically a piece of wire mesh that go on the front of the house, making it difficult for predators to get into. Usually these are better than nothing. Sometimes you can still have predators try and kind of get past that, but if you're not able to get a baffle or offer another option, those are a great option as well too. They're also useful, especially if you have it mounted on a tree as well. And another thing too is bluebirds don't like hanging houses as much unless it's a very stable hanging house. So they do prefer a mounted style box as well. Hanging houses are great for wrens or chickadees. So if you want a certain style bird, make sure you're getting the right house for them as well too. So like I mentioned, for trees, Noel guards are great. And a study was done, my goodness, I forgot when it was done, but I would say relatively recently, into the aspect of using a 1 millimeter thick acetate sheet that is 32 inches tall, that wraps around the base of a tree that you can kind of attach with like a tape as well, that basically provides protection from snakes and other things as well. Only thing about utilizing this is making sure there are no other trees nearby that other animals can potentially just cross over from. But the acetate sheet is also another option to reduce that predator aspect. You only use it during nesting season, so when nesting season is done, you take that off the tree because you don't want to cause any damage to the tree as well too. So there's information on that at Nest Watch as well that does a great job in observing the biology of birds and how nesting strategies are going and things like that as well. If you're looking to set up more than one bluebird box in your yard, you want to have them at least 100 to 150 feet apart. 100 is usually the main recommendation. You can put boxes 50 feet apart from each other, but usually you're not going to get two bluebirds in that same spot because, again, they can be very competitive. So if you have an area with, example, tree swallows, which can also be very competitive with bluebirds if you've got the right habitat for both, you can have one box have a bluebird and 50 feet apart have a tree swallow in the other. So you can have that as well. And it is important to monitor these nest boxes as well. As a reminder, with bluebird boxes in general, not only do you get bluebirds, but of our native birds, you can also get chickadees, wrens, and titmice too. If those birds happen to take over the nest box, just let them do their thing. Everybody is looking for a good nesting spot during this time of year. But it is just good to maintain once the birds have fledged and that nest has been kind of squashed and used, you can clean that out to give other birds that season a good chance to get in there and have a clean start for when they raise their young as well. So definitely feel free to kind of maintain that and monitor as well. Make sure your boxes are ready for this season because it is definitely on its way. So a lot of the resources that were used today, a lot of the images and video came from Macaulay Library at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Nest Watch was also utilized. Again, they're really cool for if you ever have nest boxes of your own that you monitor. They're really cool. You can kind of get involved in that program to show to monitor your boxes so they have an idea of how things are going or where birds are nesting and what's going on as well too. So they've also got great resources on building nest boxes, building predator guards, and different things like that as well. And if you ever want to learn more about your birds in general, allaboutbirds.org is a great, easy resource to kind of check out habitat, maps, sounds, and all that kind of thing as well, too. So with that said, if you do plan on coming into the store today, I do have a $5 off a $25 purchase or more coupon code, which is Bluebird. So feel free to use that either in store or through a phone order as well. There'll be a second viewing of this presentation at 11 if you feel like anybody is interested. And this will also be posted to our YouTube channel as well, Wild Birds Unlimited of Concord, NC. So if you know anybody that's interested that doesn't have a Facebook page, it'll be up there later today as well. So with that, that's kind of all I have to offer, but thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you guys are set and ready for Bluebird season because it is coming up, and I hope to hear all about how it's going. So thank you all very much, and I hope you have a good day. See you next time.